Hello! It's been a while since I did one of these review style videos, longer than it has been since I did my previous countdowns. And in those two videos, I talked about a game that was in the process of dying, and a game that died not long after I made that video. But this time, I'm back with a game that is just coming out right now, and hopefully won't be dying anytime soon. Well, hopefully, I might just be like Grim Reaper of video games. Elestrals Clash is the new digital client for the trading card game Elestrals. I remember hearing about this series back when its creator, YouTuber A-Drive, teased it during his 1 million subscriber milestone, though I never really followed it afterwards. It wouldn't be until several years later, around the release of the Kickstarter, that I ended up hearing about it again from some YouTubers I was watching, both due to them having interest in the game, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Not being in the greatest place at the time. Since then, I watched the game develop from afar, though I never really got any of the cards. Partly because I live in a country that uses Monopoly money, but also because I didn't want to get into a new TCG that wasn't being played locally, and a lot of people seemed to share that sentiment. There were tons of people who were interested in this game, but weren't willing to put down their hard-earned cash for it if there wasn't going to be any way to actually play it. And the people working on Elestrals could see that, and they decided to try and fix it. In October of 2024, Elestrals would release a second Kickstarter campaign for their digital client Elestrals Clash, asking for $2,500 and making a little over double that. The game would be developed by the team behind Pixelborn, which had previously given people unofficial ways to play games like Lorcana and Riftbound. It promised to be a fantastic way to play Elestrals, with fully automated games similar to other online clients, unlockable artworks and customization, and every card in the game, from the start, for free! That last bit is probably what got a lot of people willing to jump into the game, though it's also what made me a bit concerned. Like, on the one hand, it makes it easier to show to my friends and get them into the game since they don't need to grind for new decks, but on the other hand, Legends of Runeterra was a game that was murdered because of how free-to-play friendly it was. And this is even more free-to-play friendly, so I was nervous about this meeting a similar fate. And some of those nerves were backed up by how fast the expected development of the game was, expecting it to launch in the first quarter of 2025. Let me remind you that this Kickstarter was from October 2024. That goalpost was naturally moved as development got underway, with it going from closed alpha to closed beta, the latter of which I was part of, before finally releasing in an open beta on July 29th to mixed reception. Clearly the game had some kinks that needed to be ironed out, but what exactly were they, and what has it already gotten right? Well, that's what I'm here to answer. Having played over a dozen hours in the initial playtest, and a dozen or so in the open beta, let's see if Elestrals Clash has what it takes to stand among the greats, or if it'll just clash and burn. Yeah, sure, that's what we're going with. Clash starts with a login screen. Makes sense given that it's going to be on mobile devices, so you would need a way to transfer save data between it and the PC. But man, as much as I want to go past this and get into the main course, this is actually kind of bad and somehow worse than the old one from the closed beta. There you had a standard login screen, but here you can go to login with your club caster account, which is how it previously worked, but you also have a guest login. That login is for without a club account and is tied to that specific platform, but also apparently gets wiped if later on you make an account, so it's probably gonna feel really shitty if you start with a guest account and then make a new one later. Logging in is also weird. Once you link your account, the game will remember it, but you will always have to click caster login to proceed. No automatic login like it previously had. It also opens a window in your browser with this like source website saying true. I assume this isn't supposed to be happening. It's just confirming your login worked, but it's so bizarre that it happens like this. I think it's mostly just a minor annoyance, but it happens every single time you log in, so it's a very consistent minor annoyance. Once we get logged in, we're met with a tutorial. Here, Zeus teaches us the basics of the game. There's 4 gameplay segments we have to work through, each teaching us different parts of the game. The first teaches us how to summon an Elestral and attack with it, as well as teaching us how to enchant it with spirits from your spirit deck. The second one is mainly just teaching us about battle positions and how to change them, while the third one teaches us about runes, with invoke runes being akin to spells, while counter runes are akin to traps. The final tutorial, meanwhile, is a complete mess that tries to shove in as much information as possible. It's one of those, use everything you learn to beat the strong enemy, but instead uses it to try and teach a bunch of stuff at once that you wouldn't know otherwise. Like in this one part, you learn about artifact runes, stadium runes, summoning high level Elestrals over smaller ones, Elestrals dying if you don't have the amount of spirits that they're required to have? Like it's just too much. The worst of it is nexusing. It's this action you can do with some cards that moves a spirit from one of your face-up cards to another one of them. And there are multiple reasons why you would want to do this. But here, it's just a thing you do to beat over the big guy. Hell, the main reason you're using the card that allows you to nexus is so you can activate its secondary effect to change its battle position. So that could make players think that nexusing is something that you do as a cost for an effect rather than something you would actually want to do with a reason. The solution to this would be having more sections of the tutorial, rather than trying to force everything into one big super section and just glossing over everything. Don't know why battle positions got their own segments, but other things didn't. Though I do like how in that section, they do explain how you take damage by having you crash into an Elestral, then pay the cost of it, teaching you that you instead take damage based on how many spirits are enchanting the Elestral rather than its attack stat. Though I do feel it would make more sense if they had you use something like Hydrake, since crashing Hydrake into something is actually a legitimate strategy you can do. Maybe have like a 5 attack Elestral with 2 spirits, you crash Hydrake, pay 1 for the damage, then summon its evolution, crash that, and then you summon Pantera and go for game. There's also some other things that they don't cover in the tutorial that would be nice to mention in some form or another. During the tutorials, you can cast the Elestrals with whatever elements you want, since they are dummy cards, but in an actual game, while you can cast an Elestral with the wrong spirit, doing so will cause it to become misenchanted, meaning it loses its effects. This would actually be a really good chance to explain that to players, but instead it's mentioned during the section when you're casting Earthquake, and it's only in a single line of dialogue, which I'm gonna be completely honest, I missed both times when I first did the tutorial, and only noticed when I was going back to get footage for this. So I think it's not unreasonable to think that new players would miss that as well. Once we complete all that, we'll have one final word from Zeus, telling us that he's so impressed with our play that he gives us the entire card pool, which I do think is a cute way of explaining why we have everything. We then have a brief tutorial from Demeter about several things on the menu, giving us a glimpse at the shop and Pandora's box, as well as showing us how to equip things like skins and decks. I really hate how they force you to open Pandora's box during the tutorial. I get that it's so you can show off the Pantera skin you get, and teach the player about equipping cards and card editing, which allows you to apply holography to your cards, but making new players use your gacha system as part of the tutorial is the type of shady tactic I expect out of a mobile game. Even giving them the skin as part of it reeks of giving a new player a good hit to make them addicted to it, which is something those types of games do pull. I doubt this was the actual intention of the developers, but it was something that rubbed me the wrong way upon seeing it. But easily the most frustrating thing is what they do at the end of the tutorial. After learning about card edit, Demeter has you equip the Wind Starter deck, then has you queue up for a match. A PvP match. Mere minutes after doing the basic tutorial, and on a deck you didn't even get a chance to look at. Now, you can cancel the match while you're looking for one, but you could also get into a match before that option becomes available. I know this because it happened to me. There's throwing new players into the deep end, and then there's tossing them to the lions and telling them to fend for themselves. And it's not like the starter deck is a bad one. Hell, I won the match I got thrown into. But a new kid on the block shouldn't have to be put into the situation where they could go up against real people on real decks. And this perfectly encapsulates the issue with the tutorial, and how even if it does an alright job explaining the basics, it doesn't properly prepare a player before throwing them into a real match. I'd also be remiss to mention that on launch, the tutorial had multiple ways of soft locking players, which I never experienced thankfully, though I did get soft locked while trying to change a skin, but it has been a very common issue other people have had, though they have made hotfixes to solve those issues, and thankfully there is some good news for the future, as they said they are working on an improved tutorial that will be coming out in the coming weeks, which in turn means this entire segment could be outdated soon, but I think it's best to get this out there as both feedback and as an example of what not to do if you're making a game. But yeah, for a lot of players this was a bad first impression. And it's a real shame because I feel once you get past that bad first impression, the game improves greatly, with some hiccups here and there. Well, since we're here, let's look at the menus. There's 4 categories on the side, which can bring you to their own subsections. Starting at the bottom, so we can transition into gameplay once we get to that section, we have the store. The store is well, a store. It's what you expect. Here you can buy all sorts of cosmetics, from buddies to boards to even alternate artwork. There are 5 different currencies, which could be confusing to people, though they're simple enough that it shouldn't be an issue. There's keys, which are used to open Pandora's box, which you will have learned about during the tutorial, but there's also Pandora's tokens. You get these from milestones on the gacha system, and can be redeemed once you get enough to unlock the current jackpot item. Basically something similar to the medallions in TFT. Coins are the most common currency you'll see. The description says it's used to upgrade cards, but the only thing they are currently used for is buying keys, which is weird. It feels like the description wasn't changed when their purpose was redesigned. Gems are the premium currency of the game. It's always gems. These can be used to buy most of the cosmetics you'll see, such as buddies, boards, and so on. You'll also get a small amount from leveling up, though it's probably not going to be enough to allow you to easily buy any of these. Why are all the prices in euro? I'm Canadian. Finally, there's Ash. This is obtained through things like Pandora's box, and is mainly used to upgrade cards with the card edit feature, but can also be used to purchase certain alternate artworks. It does require a lot of Ash, but I do appreciate the option being there. The next section is the Clash Pass. Yeah, it's a battle pass, I'm not sure what you expect me to say. You'll have to get it with gems, and it gets you things like currencies, alternate artworks, boards, and a stellar buddy, though it doesn't give you gems back, so you won't be making your money back like in DBD or Fortnite. The collection tab is where all of your cosmetics are, as well as all of your decks. Here you'll be able to change your buddies, boards, card backs, and so on. I do love a lot of the emotes they have. They're very fun, though I find myself rarely using them during the game, and it kind of feels like they're mostly there just to BM people. I also like how on the deck screen, you can see the win rate of your deck, both for its overall win rate and the current build after you recently changed it. Building a deck is how you think it would be. You pick your cards and add them to the deck, with Elestrals and runes being separated into their own sections. One thing I do really like about this is how the subsections here are set up. You have the elements listed along the top in a row, while the other search categories such as subclasses, card types, and other search options are tucked away in their own drop-down menu. It puts the most important part of deck building, what elements you're using, front and center, while more specific things can be found on their own if you need them. Oh, and the Spirit deck is off on its own in its own little sub-menu. Finally, we have the home menu, which is the screen that leads into the actual game. There'll be pop-ups linking to whatever's new and going on in the Elestrals world, as well as the task menu, which brings you to missions to complete to earn points for the battle pass, coins, or keys. You can also view your profile here and change some things like your title, though weirdly some of the customization option is locked into the collection tab, like the icon you use and your badge, though this is likely a leftover from when there wasn't a profile tab originally, and collection was where all of the customization was. Clicking play brings us to the match menu, with 5 options to choose from. There's the tutorial, which I already went over, as well as ranked, friendly, trial, and train. Ranked is your standard match that you'll be queuing up for. Friendly sounds like it'd be in unranked modes, but it's actually private matches. Bit of a weird name, but I get the idea. It's a friendly match, you're playing with your friends, so it's fine. Trial is interesting. It's essentially a puzzle match, putting you into a scenario and asking you to figure out how to win with what you have available. I love these types of challenges, and I hope we see more of them in the future. And finally, we have the training mode, which doesn't function the way you might think it does. What it does is allow you to queue into a sandbox with a deck to test it out, with the option to have the opponent's field already set up to see if you can break it. This is a neat idea in concept, though I think the execution is a bit lacking in a lot of ways. Most notably, the bot won't do anything to play against you, so anything that requires your opponent to do something to test is completely off the table. This is because there's no actual programmed AI in Elestrals, just bots that are meant to hold specific boards for you, which I think is a shame since even a basic computer player could greatly improve practice. In fact, this would actually solve one of the issues I brought up during the tutorial. If instead of being sent into a PvP match at the end of it, they instead had you play against a bot player, it would soften the blow so much. I know bots are a tricky thing to program, which is likely why they've been putting off doing it, but I think the benefits to adding them would greatly improve the game so much. They also don't let you choose what cards you have. You have to draw them naturally like in an actual match, which makes it hard to actually test things if you aren't finding the cards you want, because there is a reason why you wouldn't want a sandbox mode like this, to test interactions and combos. For example, I wanted to see if I could pay the cost of Altar of Stars with a 2-cost artifact rune, then nexus the second spirit off of it onto a different card, and I was. Which is nice to be able to go into a private match to check, instead of having to queue up into a real one, and potentially throw a game because I was trying to test an interaction. but I still had to dig through my deck to try and find the cards I needed to do this, which was really annoying. I think the overall verdict on this mode is that it's a good idea, but it doesn't live up to what it could be. But that's not the main thing we're here to see. We want to know how good the actual game is, and how well this client does at being a way to play Elestrals. Well, let's hop into a match and see how it goes. Since we're getting into a match proper, I'll explain a bit about Elestrals and give my thoughts on it. The game takes a lot of notes from various other card games such as Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, and Magic, but has a few unique things that it tries for itself. You start with 5 cards in hand and are given the option to shuffle your hand back for a brand new one, though that costs 2 spirits to do so. I do like this. It gives you the ability to redo your hand if you don't like it, but it isn't for free, and not having those 2 spirits could matter in the long run. The most important thing to know about is the spirit deck. While most card games have a mana system to go along with your health to control how much you can do early on, Elestrals instead combines the two into the spirit deck. You have 20 spirits, and every time you cast an Elestral, rune, or take damage, you have to expend a spirit from it. That might sound like it could lead to you losing all of your health during your combos and have no way to deal with things such as burn, but you can also pay spirits off of your board. They don't go away when you use them, they instead become enchanted to whatever card you are using, only going to the underworld once that card does. So it functions more similarly to energy in Pokemon than a traditional mana system, even down to, as I said, being able to place the wrong elements onto your cards. I've seen some people say that they don't like this system, which is understandable, but I personally find it really fun. Managing what type of spirits I have available is a fun type of challenge for me, and it makes those matches that come down to the wire even more satisfying. A great example is this match I played a few days ago. My opponent had used Rock in a Hard Place, which allowed them to special send Eddie into Curibus. I didn't immediately have an out for it, and for the next several turns, it was a back and forth between me trying to out this guy while also keeping myself alive. Both of us expending a ton of spirits in the process, but one thing I made sure to do during all of this was to keep 1 water spirit in my spirit deck. Why? Because I knew that one of my outs for this card was to draw my own Eddie, and I could easily hold out for it if I kept 1 water spirit on the back. And holy shit, I actually found him, which finally outed the Curibus. Sure, I ultimately lost that match, but it was still so satisfying. I also like how you can pay your spirits off of your Elestrals, not only being able to make use of spirits that are no longer in use, but also for the fact that it can prevent you from allowing your opponent to get certain effects off. I remember one match I had. I didn't record it so I can't show it, but I was in a situation where I had Wasp Ivy, Cyanectar, and a set poison-tipped arrow. My opponent summoned Nabi, who on summon made my guys lose 2 attack, and if Nabi destroys an Elestral by battle, it can ascend into Doppelgator, which could cause my Wasp Ivy to lose 2 more attack, making it weaker than Doppelgator and allowing it to be destroyed. So I used my poison-tipped arrow paying off of Cyanectar so that it would be removed from the field, meaning Nabi no longer had something to attack over, and thus couldn't get to Doppelgator. It was a really cool interaction, and is just one example of how awesome this system is. Another thing I like is the normal actions. These are one of 3 things you can do during your turn. You can either normal cast an Elestral from your hand, re-enchant an Elestral with an additional spirit, or expend a spirit to draw a card. The normal cast is basically normal summoning, but having the 2 additional things you can do instead of normaling is really cool. Re-enchanting can trigger effects that activate when they get certain spirits, such as Ask Rabbit's effect to add, but expending to draw a card is an incredibly clever idea, because you're not keeping the spirit like the other 2 options. You're expending it, so you're not just giving up on your normal summon, but also some of your health to either fish run out, or for some back row to keep up your lead, which I think is really cool. You can only normal cast 1 cost Elestrals normally. In order to summon 2 or 3 costs, you'll have to ascend them over an Elestral that's already on the field. Think of it like evolving in Pokemon. Any spirits that attach to the previous Elestral will be transferred to the new one, though you will need to meet the minimum amount of spirits for that new Elestral when you're trying to summon over it. So a 3-cost Elestral can't be placed on one with 1 spirit, it has to have 2 or more, since you'll also be enchanting a new spirit onto it. There's also some Elestrals with special ascension effects, allowing you to cast those cards outright or ascend them into their evolved forms, which directly ties into how this is like Pokemon. And this is the main way you'll be casting out most of the big ones. Unfortunately, for as cool as this is, it does lead to one of the major issues with the gameplay of Clash: the UI. So whenever you use an effect to search something from deck, it'll bring up this full screen showing every single card that you have. Kind of weird that it shows everything in your deck instead of just the legal search targets, even lets you attempt to choose something, but there is some benefit to seeing what's left in your deck, so you know what to play towards. The more frustrating thing is what happens when you try to special something. When you attempt to do so, you're greeted with this. A deck that is missing most of your cards. What the hell is this? Well, that's because this isn't our deck. It's our hand. If you want to view your deck, you'll have to click this icon in the top left to switch to your deck, which is such a weird design choice, and this has been an issue for months. I remember when Viserys was first added, everyone thought it was bugged because they couldn't find out where the other copies were. But nope, it was working as intended, they just weren't showing it because you had to click this stupid icon. And what baffles me is that there's multiple different ways that this could have been handled that would have been much better. The obvious being to have both the deck and the hand on the same screen, with little boxes separating the two. Another solution would be to have the button that switches between hand and deck in the middle or bottom of the screen instead of the top left. Since the confirm is in the bottom left, there's nothing stopping you from putting it somewhere else. And I think people will appreciate that a lot more than having their effects fizzle because they couldn't navigate the UI in time. Another weird part of the UI is the log. Aside from the fact that it's honestly pretty useless, it's just a tiny wall of text, it overlaps with the opponent's underworld, so very frequently when you try to look at it, you accidentally open their underworld instead, and it can make closing the logs extremely annoying. There's a couple more UI hiccups here and there. Ascending over an Elestral plays the effect for it being destroyed, which sometimes makes me think it bugged out and destroyed it instead. Also, when you special cast, it shows a menu like you're activating its ability when choosing to summon it, which is kind of a weird design choice. But easily the most annoying one is how they handled Ask Rabbit's effect. When it receives a Thunder Spirit, you look at the top 3 cards of your deck, and choose one to add to your hand. So you think you would click on the card you want to add when doing this, but instead you have to click this button that says draw that is above the card, which is really unintuitive. Especially since this is supposed to be coming to mobile devices in the future, and it would be a lot harder to click this tiny draw button on a very small screen, especially compared to just clicking the card. It's not a bad way to indicate what you selected, even though darkening the other cards would have also worked. It's just really weird that they chose to have this be the way you select the card. And that is a real shame that there's so many UI issues because design-wise I really like how the UI looks, especially with these star-like patterns. Honestly, the game overall looks pretty nice. Not groundbreaking by any means, and it definitely could use some more polish, but it's really nice. Some of the boards look very clean and even change how your underworld looks. You can see what types of spirits are enchanting Elestrals based on the icons that are next to them, which wasn't always a thing previously, and is really nice since it helps at a glance, and the visual effects for several things are very good. I especially like the animation for enchanting a spirit. It's this little star that's colored like the spirit you're enchanting, which allows you to tell at a glance what your opponent is using, which is really nice. The only thing that I think looks below standard is the buddies you have. They act like mates in Mastodor or guardians in Legends of Runeterra, and they just don't look up to par, especially with the newer, more clean boards. I think the main issue is the lighting. They have a very flat look to them, like they didn't fully render, and it makes them feel very unfinished. I also really don't like how you can see what cards people are hovering over. I get that this is likely because that's how it is in real life. You see what card your opponent's considering and make assessments from there. But if I'm on an online sim, I'm probably going to be playing more casually, and having to start being considerate of what cards I'm hovering not to give info is something that just isn't fun to me. You can also see what cards they're looking at on the field, but that bothers me much less. If anything, I kind of appreciate knowing that the reason my opponent is taking some time to think is because they're reading my card. Plus, hovering over your back row is rarely an issue, since the game will give you a prompt to activate it if you can, which is usually when people do. Sound design is mostly fine. A bit before the game went into beta, they got a massive update to most of the sound effects, and it's overall pretty good. The sound for enchanting an Elestral and casting a card is fitting, having a very mystical vibe to it. And the metal clank when setting a card feels very impactful. I do feel like the rocky sound effect for hitting something is a bit stock sounding. feel like it could be changed a bit so it feels a bit more satisfying. I also think it would make a bit more sense for it to only play when attacking the spirit deck, since you're hitting a stone statue, and maybe have a different sound effect for attacking an Elestral. As for music, it's pretty nice. Originally there was only 2 music tracks, the main menu track and the battle track, but they have added several new ones for the menus, and an entirely new battle track that is really chill. Though I will admit I usually play with the music off and tend to listen to other things in the background. Before we wrap this up, I should talk about the one last thing worth bringing up. Those being the bugs. I didn't run into too many bugs during my playtime, or if I did they weren't noticeable, but there were some that were problematic. The most common one, and the one that could have been game determinative on a couple occasions, is one with Formite Champion of Hestia. Whenever it receives a fire spirit, it can reduce the attack of an Elestral by 3, so if you give it 2 spirits through Hestia's Hearth, you can reduce the attack of one by 6. Or you can reduce the attack of 2 different Elestrals by 3. But when I tried selecting 2 different Elestrals, it would always end up doubling up the effect on the second one I chose, which meant I couldn't keep one of my alive from 2 different attacks. And this is a very consistent bug. It has happened to me multiple times. And as I'm recording this, it still hasn't been patched. I already mentioned how I got soft lock while trying to unequip a skin. I was able to back out to the menu using the escape key, but the game kept trying to load something and I couldn't click anywhere, so I had to just manually close the game. And while I don't know if this was exactly because of a bug since it happened to my opponents, during a match where I had Eddie switch an opponent's Spectrus to defense mode, my opponent seemingly couldn't switch it back to attack. They were hovering over the card, and their emails were indicating that they were having some issues, which absolutely made the match harder for them. Not sure how this happened. The only different thing that happened in that game compared to usual games is that the guy was misenchanted, so maybe it has something to do with that, but I don't know. And I think that about covers everything for Elestrals Clash. So after all of that, I think my verdict for the game is that I can completely understand why some people have issues with it. I really like this game. I wouldn't have played it for so long if I didn't. But it is really rough around the edges. I think the biggest takeaway is that it came out way too soon. There was a lot of stuff that the devs clearly needed to fix, and a ton of stuff on the previously closed beta that they did fix, but it wasn't in the state it needed to be when it came out. And I think the reason why it went out so soon is the same reason why they aimed for a first quarter release date. This is a game that A-Drive and his team has been really passionate about, wanted to share with all the people that weren't able to play, so they wanted to get it out as soon as possible. But as a result, things weren't fully worked out. The tutorial, for example, was added a few days before the beta went live, so there was no time to get feedback on it and make adjustments before the majority of players got to experience it. And as a result, a lot of people got burned. I'm hoping in the future that the game is able to be brought into a much better position for new players, because I really like this game and I wanted to share it with my friends. But I feel currently it's not ready yet. I'm wishing A-Drive and his team the best when it comes to getting this game worked out, because if everything goes well, then I think we'll have something truly special on our hands. And also good luck on that RPG, I am very interested in seeing where that goes. If you want to play this game right now despite its issues, I'll have a link to the store page in the description. You may even manage to run into me during a match or two. But regardless, I hope you enjoyed this video. And let me know if you'd like to see more of them in the future, or even what you would like me to cover. My name's Era, and thanks for listening to this little story.